Hey, my name is Tyler. Today we're just going to talk about what I consider the greatest NBA trade of all times. Um, Basically, what this trade was this was the 2016 draft day trade of Serge Ibaka from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Orlando Magic for Victor Oladipo, Domantas Sabonis, and Ersan Ilyasova. It's easy for me to say. Um, Full disclosure, I am a Thunder fan. That really has no bearing on the reason that I think this is the greatest trade of all times. The reason that I think this is the greatest trade of all times is because it's basically the gift that keeps on giving. We're going to go down the trades, and it's going to get a little convoluted a little bit. But basically, this trade spurred so many trades, and possibly what some people may consider one of the greatest trades of all times between the Thunder and the Clippers. But we're just going to go down it. I will tell you that I went, basically my source here is basketballreference.com. So I basically, all the trades, I trace them from basketballreference.com. So if for some reason there's some mess ups, and I'll tell you, if I feel like there's a mess up, there's a couple of trades that I think there were actually more people involved in, that weren't included on the basketball reference page. So, if I get it wrong, whatever, then just know that I'm going strictly off of what they have on basketballreference.com, which they're usually a pretty good source. Basically, just to kind of set up this trade, if we remember correctly, if you know NBA history at all, the Thunder had just lost to the Golden State Warriors in the 2016 NBA Western Conference Finals. They lost a 3-1 lead. Kevin Durant was about to become a free agent right after this draft. Like a week after the draft, I think is how they worked that out. So basically what this trade was meant to be, was Sam Presti was going to hedge against Kevin Durant leaving. So if Kevin Durant left, he was going to make sure that they kind of still had a team that could compete. Maybe not as good as they were with Kevin Durant, but he wanted a team that could still compete for a couple of years. They still had Russell Westbrook, which would end up winning the 2017 MVP, regular season MVP. And obviously was a great player at the time. Steven Adams was an upcoming big that had a pretty good playoff run. So they basically were wanting to hedge against KD. If he left, they would still be good. Obviously, if KD stayed, then they would have a really good team, and they were trying to build it a little bit different, trying to compete with Golden State. I personally feel like if Kevin Durant would have stayed, they probably were better than the Warriors were with this trade, at least for that season, and probably seasons the next few seasons after that. But I feel like with this trade, they were probably with Kevin Durant, they were probably the Western Conference pick to go to the finals that year. A lot of people don't agree with that, but a lot of people also forget that this trade was even made. Okay, so basically, I'm going to go down the trades. We're going to kind of go down each as they were traded. All right, so we may get out of order a little bit, but basically, we're just going to follow the trades, and I think you'll pick up where I'm coming from with those trades as I lay them out. I do have my note cards with me because, like I said, there are a lot of offshoots of this trade. Okay, a lot of offshoots to this trade, and there's going to be a lot of offshoots probably still pending off of this trade because there are still quite a few moving parts that that were involved in this trade or ended up being involved in this trade through draft picks or whatever. So we're just going to start off. Like I said, the trade was a draft day trade between Serge Ibaka. Serge Ibaka was a little unhappy with the Thunder, and the Thunder weren't. He didn't have a real good series against Golden State, or the Thunder felt like he didn't have a very good series against Golden State. And he had been quite vocal in the press here in Oklahoma that he wanted more touches. He wanted more shots. He felt like he didn't get enough touches and shots. And I don't really think the Thunder really felt that way. I think the Thunder felt like, we have Kevin Durant. We have Russell Westbrook. We have Enes Kanter at the time. Who's in his freedom now. We don't really need you to get more shots. You're getting probably the amount of shots we would like you to have. We would like you to rebound a little bit more and maybe block some more shots. But unfortunately, like I said, he had started kind of going downhill a little bit. And obviously he was a good player. Like you look at the Raptors, in 2019, I believe, he was a vital part of the Raptors winning the NBA title, which we're not really going to get into that. We're not going to get into the offshoots from other teams, but if you look, the Raptors traded for Serge Ibaka. They traded Terrence Ross and some other guys that I think ended up being decent players, or had offshoot trades that could help Orlando down the stretch there. Maybe some good players for Orlando now. But we're not going to touch on that. We're going to touch on just the Thunder because Sam Presti is the guy that made this trade. This is a trade that, it started kind of an avalanche of, like I said, some of the most shocking trades in NBA history, or at least in the last 10 to 20 years, 30 years maybe. And this was kind of where it all started. Okay, so like I said, it was Serge Ibaka got traded to Orlando for Victor Oladipo, Ersan Ilyasova, and the 11th pick in the 2016 NBA draft, which ended up being Domantas Sabonis. So that was the initial trade. Okay, so basically, Serge Ibaka for Victor Oladipo, who was, I think, it just averaged 20 plus points a game for Orlando. Was a stud that year at Orlando. If anybody remembers that, he was really good at Orlando. Ersan Ilyasova, who is I really liked as a player. I'm not sure if he's still in the NBA, but he was a really good player. I thought he was a great role player. Could knock shots down, could really stretch the defense. I think that, he, in his short time with the Thunder, I thought he was a really good player. I think with a Kevin Durant type, he would have been unbelievable player. Oladipo would have been an unbelievable player. Sabonis, who they drafted, the year that he was with the Thunder, they kind of made him a three-point shooter, which was kind of weird because Gonzaga, he was a big-time post player, could score around the basket. Obviously, his dad is one of the most skilled big men ever. He's a multi-time All-Star, so he kind of has those same skills. I don't really know if maybe Steven Adams, if they were stretching him out just because of Steven Adams, not wanting to clog the lane up for Russ. I'm not sure what the deal was with him with the Thunder. But once he went to Indiana, which we'll talk about in a second, but once he went to Indiana, they kind of put him on the block a little bit more. Obviously, he became an all-star. He's one of the top big men in the NBA right now for the Sacramento Kings. So that was the initial trade. Midway through the NBA season, probably not even midway, like a month into the season, I think Ilyasova played like 11, maybe less games for the Thunder. Ilyasova was traded to the 76ers for Jeremy Grant. He was it was Jeremy Grant, it was Ilyasova, and a 2020 first round pick. My bad, for Jeremy Grant. Now the 2020 NBA, the first round pick, which this kind of puts a dent in how great this trade was, but I still think it's a pretty great trade, was Tyrese Maxey, which is a star, might be an NBA All-Star this year. He's playing at an NBA All-Star level this year in 23-24. So the trade was Ilyasova, 2020 first-round pick, for Jeremy Grant, who was a valuable role player. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that the 76ers were kind of still in the process. I don't know if they were fully going for it at that time. I'm not sure. Can't really remember that, but that far off. But they were pretty close. They were either trying to compete for that year, or they were a year away from competing. So that was the initial trade. Okay, and like I said, we're going to go out of order a little bit just because we're going to go down who was traded for who and that type of deal. Jeremy Grant was eventually traded to the Nuggets, I believe, in 2020. That was a draft day trade as well. I believe it was 2020, or it might have been 2019. I'm not sure, but so he was traded for a first round pick in 2020. I believe it was 2019. Now that I think about it. So he was traded for a first round pick. Now this is going to be this was a crazy trade. Okay, the 2020 pick was traded the next year in the draft. During the draft, the 2020 pick that the Thunder held was the 25th pick, I believe, and they traded it to the Timberwolves for the 17th pick, which ended up being Alexei Pokusevski, who is currently with the Thunder. Then like I said, and also James Johnson, and then a 2024 second round pick. That was the trade initially. It was the 25th pick, or was the 17th pick, James Johnson, the 2024 second round pick for the 17th pick, which the Timberwolves held. The Timberwolves for the Thunder picked Alexei Pokusevski. 25th pick was then traded. The T-Wolves traded for the 26th pick, and I'm Leander or something. Like I said, I'm not going to get into how these trade, but basically the 25th pick ended up being Emmanuel Quickley, which is a pretty good player for the Knicks. So the Timberwolves trade with the Knicks, which had the 26th pick. So since we're keeping track of the Thunder now have, they got Pokusevski, James Johnson, and a 24 second round pick. Then they traded James Johnson like a week later. They traded him in another kind of weird trade. There was, I think, a 3-teamer with Phoenix, I believe. but they traded James Johnson to the Mavericks for Justin Jackson. And they actually traded, I think, for 2023 second round pick. But through, I don't really know what, there was some other trade or the NBA vetoed this or something. But anyways, for some reason, the Mavericks got their 2023 second round pick back. And then the Thunder also received Trevor Ariza. Like I said, I believe he was from the Suns. Just a little background on that. They ended up waiving Justin Jackson. He was pretty good in the preseason for him. He played in the preseason. He was pretty good. And then the final cut or so, they released him. They waived him. Basically to make room for younger guys, I believe. But Trevor Ariza refused to report to the Thunder. He didn't want to play for them. They were rebuilding at this time, and were thought to be rebuilding at this time. So he didn't want to report to them, and kind of. So they ended up trading him to the Heat for Myers Leonard, which they released, and then they got a 2027 second round pick for him. And like I said, he probably would have yielded more if he would have played for him. But basically, he got traded. I think it's a trade deadline the next season. He hadn't even, like I said, he hadn't even been to Oklahoma City yet. He was still out, I believe, in Portland. Just living his best life. And so they traded him, just tried to get something back for him. They got Myers Leonard, which was basically a contract dump. They just waived him, paid him a little bit of money. I don't even know if he ended up playing anywhere else. I think he probably did. I think maybe the Mavericks or somebody like that. And so they got a 2027 second round pick basically for Trevor Ariza, who was still a valuable member, and it was a valuable member of the Heat in the playoffs that year. So, so they probably may have gotten more, but they just were basically just trying to get somebody for Ariza. So I'm going to get a drink just because we're going to go, things are going to get a little wild from here on. All right, so the other two members, so we went down the Ilyasova trail, I guess, and now we're going to go down the Oladipo and Domas Sabonis trail, which is where it gets a little wild. But basically, those two guys were traded after the season for Paul George. Indiana Pacers. Paul George was obviously was being very vocal at the time, if we remember, that he wanted out of Indiana, and I guess him and Russell Westbrook were best buddies or whatever from L.A., and so he wanted to, I guess, go to the Thunder, whatever. The Thunder traded Sabonis and Oladipo, which was a great trade. It actually worked out really well because both those guys started striving. Oladipo was one of the top players in the NBA. We kind of forget that now, but he was definitely one of the best guards in the NBA that year. That next year, that first year for the Pacers, and then he tore his knee up and had some struggles, and he really hadn't been right since. But he was a really good player that year. Sabonis, it was obvious from day one that he was kind of in the right spot. They put him in a spot that he could really strive in, and like I said earlier, he became one of the top big men in the NBA. It's been a multi-time All-Star now in both leagues, so worked out really well for Indiana. Worked out really well for the Thunder. They were able to kind of probably extend their run. Like I said, they were basically making that trade to hedge KD. Obviously, KD leaves in free agency next year. They're not bad. They're pretty good. I think they lost to Houston in the first round of the playoffs. And then getting Paul George kind of extended their run a little bit, because I think at the end of the year it was kind of one of those, like, we're probably gonna have to make some decisions. We're probably, like, do we really want to keep these guys together? They're not good enough to win an NBA title. We really need another star to go along with Russ. Russ averages a triple-double. We can't, like, sure, he's going to maybe average a triple-double, but we can't have that. Like, we have to have other pieces. So enter Paul George ends up being like I said, a good thing for both teams. The Thunder end up going and playing. I'm not sure if that was the Portland year. I think the Portland year was the next year. But they lose first round of the playoffs again. And kind of, it's one of those deals where it helped them, but maybe they should have blown it up that year. But it's going to help them to build something for the future, which is the future is now, has ended up being now. But so basically, that was the trade. And then Paul George was traded to the Clippers for Danilo Gallinari, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a 2021 first round draft pick, which ended up being Trey Mann, which is still with the Thunder, a 22 first round draft pick, which ended up being Jalen Williams from Santa Clara, who is one of the top young NBA players now, and it is probably a pillar of the Thunder going forward in this next 10 years or generation here of the young Thunder becoming contenders again. The initial trade was a 2023 first round pick, which the Miami Heat owned, which was the Miami Heat's pick. They didn't own it, but it was their pick that they had traded to the Clippers. The Clippers then traded it to the Thunder. That ended up being Jaime Jaquez, which has been a stud this year for Miami in the 2023-24 season. But that trade was later. The Thunder and the Heat made a trade where they actually basically they swapped picks. The 2025, basically the Thunder traded the Heat back their pick for 2023. The Heat traded 2025 first round pick to them, and they the Thunder also took the protection off of it, which was the 14th, which was a lottery pick protection, which I think ended up not being a lottery pick, so it wouldn't have mattered anyways. But they took the protection off, which kind of takes the fact that the Thunder could have probably got if it would have been a pick in the lottery, then the Thunder would have gotten a protection pick. So that kind of is semantics, but that's kind of where we're at. And then 2024 first round pick. This is all Clippers. Then the 25, which was the right to swap. I believe the 23 pick or the 22 pick was the right to swap as well. And then the 25 first round pick, which was the Heat's pick in 25. So Danilo Gallinari ended up being a really good player for the Thunder. in that next year. The kind of a side trade, I guess, that has nothing to do with the actual Serge Ibaka trade, but Russell Westbrook was traded for Chris Paul. That was the end of the year in the bubble. That was the year they ended up in the bubble. They lost to the Thunder, or the Thunder lost to the Rockets in the bubble. If you remember correctly, Game 7, the Lou Dort game. Game 7, he went crazy, hit a shot in the corner, I think, to give the Thunder the lead or something. Harden came down, got a basket, got him back up. Lou Dort caught it. Harden made a great play in the corner there, knocked the ball out of bounds, get a steal. The Rockets end up beating the Thunder in the playoffs in the bubble, which was a Game 7. So Danilo Gallinari and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander ended up being vital parts of that team. Gilgeous-Alexander had a promising year. Gallinari was really good for the Clippers the year before as well. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was a rookie the year before, had a really good year, kind of showed some promise. The next year, with Chris Paul as his backcourt mate, it was kind of obvious he was going to be a pretty good player. We remember Chris Paul's traded. They kind of start the rebuild after that year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being the focal point of that rebuild. Now he's a first team All NBA guy last year as a guard. Probably going to be a first team, or at least first team, second team All NBA guy this year. He's one of the top guards in the NBA in the world. Tore it up at the World Championships over this summer, the 2023 summer. It's just one of the best NBA players going right now. So from that, like I said, those draft picks, basically Trey Mann and Jalen Williams are still on the team. Jalen Williams is, like I said, probably the second, maybe third best player for the Thunder right now. And then, Trey Mann has been a valuable bench player for him. Kind of an instant offense type guy. He's kind of stepped back a little bit this year. Not as they have a little bit more talent now, and so they got pretty good picks with that. So then after the 2020 bubble, pandemic bubble type deal, Danilo Gallinari was traded to the Hawks for 2 second-round picks in 2025. Okay? So, right now, as of right now, like I said, the actual Thunder trade, like if we wanted to kind of go back, basically what the Thunder traded was they traded Serge Ibaka and Tyrese Maxey, which 2 pretty good players. Tyrese Maxey probably being the better player now. But basically they traded Serge Ibaka for Tyrese Maxey and Serge Ibaka, or Serge Ibaka and Tyrese Maxey for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Alexei Pokusevsky, Trey Mann, Jalen Williams, first-round picks in the 24, 25, 26 NBA draft, and then and then they have a pick swap, so the better pick. So right now, you would probably think in 2024, you would probably think that the Thunder will probably have the better record between the Clippers and them in 25. Don't really know. Maybe so. But basically, if the Thunder have a better record than the Clippers, then the Clippers would give up their pick in 25, whatever pick that might be. And then if not, then it would convey to another year or convey to second round picks or whatever it might be. I'm not really. I don't have the protection part of that. But basically, a swap at 25. So four first round picks still remaining off of that trade, off of the Paul George to the Clippers trade, and then they got second round picks for 24, 25, 2 for 25, so 25, 25, and 27. Okay, so that would be your trade. So, like I said, I believe it's the greatest trade in NBA history. There are still some parts that will, some offshoots of that. Like I would think Pokusevski's probably going to be traded in the near future. I would think Trey Mann's going to be traded in the near future. Whatever those picks might yield, whether the Thunder pick it or they trade it, those are all going to be offshoots as well. So that's kind of where I'm at. I believe it. Like I said, I believe it's the greatest trade in NBA history. Just because of the depth, like and the chain reaction that it involved, and in helping a franchise. Okay, and I also, I want to say, a lot of people think that Sam Presti, the GM of Oklahoma City Thunder, they think that he's a draft day guru, which he is. Okay, they think, oh man, you don't want to trade with him. You probably don't. All right, but understand something about him. This is, I don't want to get off on a rant, anything. I just want to be clear on this. He's had a lot of failures with draft day trades. Okay, just reading over this as I have, you'll figure out draft day trades were good and bad for him, right? So, they probably could have used Emmanuel quickly if they would have drafted Emmanuel quickly with the 25th pick. They would have just stood pat and got Emmanuel quickly. That probably helps the Thunder better. Definitely now probably helps them a ton more now than it would have to get Pokusevski. But knowing Pokusevski then, and now we kind of know where he's at, but there's still maybe a little bit of that you could see from him, maybe a little future. But that's kind of a side rant, but that's my kind of my rant. So going back, okay, I thought it would be just kind of fun to look. So basically, Kevin Durant stayed with the Golden State Warriors. Like I said, he signed free agency. That about a couple weeks later, actually, is July 4th. He signed free agency with the Golden State Warriors. And he stayed there for 3 years. All right. So I thought it would be fun just to look at those 3 years. And all of these picks, all these players could have been with the Thunder. It would have been viable for them to be with the Thunder at the same time. All right. So I know sometimes people look and like I do the same thing. Sometimes it's like, hey, you could have had this team or whatever, and it wouldn't have been viable because the money wouldn't have been right, or you're putting people into spots that wouldn't have been feasible. Which, just for an example here, if I would say, oh, he could have had Jeremy Grant and Maxey on the same team. No, he couldn't have. They couldn't have had those two players on the same team because Jeremy Grant was traded basically for Maxey. And so, the trade wouldn't have worked out. The 76ers wouldn't have traded Ilyasova for Jeremy Grant straight up. That wouldn't have happened. That first round pick was what they wanted. And Ilyasova helped them, from a on the court perspective for that season. But the first round pick was the pick that they wanted. That was the blue chip for them in that trade. So just going down, 2016-17 season. So say KD re-signs for 3 years or whatever the year, 1-1 or whatever, 2-1, whatever the deal was. They signed with Golden State. Say that he would have signed that same deal with Oklahoma City Thunder. So in 17, his point guard would have been Russell Westbrook. I believe the shooting guard, just looking back, being a Thunder fan as I am, looking back, I think that they probably would have kept Andre Roberson as their shooting guard, but they may have and put Oladipo on the bench, coming off the bench as a big time six man, kind of their James Harden. I believe that would have happened. Whether it did, I don't know. They may have started Oladipo at 2, but I think, just looking back and the way that the Thunder have handled their business, I think it probably would have been Andre Roberson. But then you would have had KD at the 3. You would have had Jeremy Grant at the 4. Then you would have had Steven Adams playing the 5. Okay, so really athletic. I mean, that five guy lineup is really athletic. Now, I do want to kind of say, a lot of people are going to argue with me that, Golden State, they had the death lineup and all that, and it was really good that year before. That was their closing lineup, and I believe that the death lineup for the Thunder here, which basically probably would have been a Russell Westbrook, Oladipo, Andre Roberson, KD at the 4, and then Jeremy Grant at the 5, or maybe even a Sabonis playing the 5, and then a Russ, Oladipo, KD, and Grant with the other 4 guys. I think that lineup would have been that death lineup would have been better. That's my own personal opinion. Maybe Golden State pivots. A lot of people think that they would have probably signed Harrison Barnes. I don't know that they would have. I think Harrison Barnes was out. I don't think he was going to stay. I think he felt disrespected. He's been really good in the playoffs and the NBA Finals for 2 years, I think. I think that he probably would have been like, yeah, I'm getting out of here. But that's my own opinion. Who knows? So that would have been their 5 lineup. Then Oladipo, Sabonis, and then Enes Kanter, which is Enes Friedman, something like that. Now, that would have been their top 8 guys. So pretty good team. They would have had a pretty good team in 2017. Then 2018, obviously after the Paul George trade, they would have had Russ. They would have had Paul George at the 2. They would have had KD at the 3. And then here's the thing that maybe we all forget. Their 4 would have been Carmelo Anthony or Grant, and then Anthony playing going on the bench, or maybe Grant playing the 5 instead of Steven Adams on the bench, whatever. They had Carmelo Anthony on that team. They had, if KD would have stayed that year, they would have had Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Kevin Durant, and Carmelo Anthony on the same team, on the same court. A lot. So, you know, Carmelo Anthony was really good for the Thunder that year. He was really good. He had a kind of a funny thing at his initial press conference where they asked him if he's coming off the bench, and he laughed it off and blah, blah, blah. It would have been interesting to see if he would have been on the Thunder with KD, if he would have been as hesitant or steadfast about starting instead of coming off the bench. I think he probably would have came off the bench. That's just my own personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think that probably would have been what happened. But for this, we're going to just put him as a starter, you know. So Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Kevin Durant, Carmelo Anthony, Steven Adams as your starting 5, and then Jeremy Grant, Andre Roberson, and I had Patrick Patterson. They were not going to be super deep that year. You know, if they were going for an NBA title, maybe they had some guys, whatever. They, you know, play different guys. I'm not sure, but they were not super deep, and they probably were not going to be super deep that year. So then and just to kind of follow up on that, kind of put a bow on that, I think 17 they probably would have been the favorites to win the NBA title. 18 they probably would have been the favorites to win the NBA title, but I don't think they would have. I think 17 they probably would have. 18 maybe Western Conference Finals, maybe they get to the finals and LeBron beats them. I don't know, but and the Cavs beat them. I don't know, but I don't think, or maybe KD smashes LeBron in the NBA Finals, which is a different topic for another day, which we will discuss at some point on this channel. But I don't really think that they had a chance in 18. I don't think they would have won it. In 19, they would have had Russ, Paul George, KD, Grant, Adams would have been their starters. And then they would have had Dennis Schroeder. If you remember, Anthony was traded basically for Schroeder and some other guys, some junk parts basically, just to get his contract. Markieff Morris would have been the 7th man, 8th man, and then it's kind of a toss-up between Patrick Patterson and Terrence Ferguson as their 8th man. I think they probably would have had about a 9-man rotation. I think that probably would have been their rotation, would have been those 9 guys that year. And if you really look at it athletically, they would have been, they would have been tough. You just look at the Russ, George, KD, Grant, Schroeder. That 5-guy lineup would have been, it would have been tough. It would have been really tough to play them. Having an athlete like the Terrence Ferguson, even though he wasn't a great NBA player, and even that year he was a little, he wasn't all there all the time. He had some good games, but he didn't always have good games. He was kind of hot or cold, hit and miss. But basically, that would have been that 3-man group. And like I said, the 2020 season probably doesn't happen. If KD would have stayed beyond that, you're probably not making the Russell Westbrook for Chris Paul trade. Maybe you do. My guess would be if in that scenario with KD, if you were going to make a Russell Westbrook trade, it would have probably been in the 19th season, between the 18th and 19th season, or it would have been between the 17 and 18, which would have pretty much nullified everything that I've said in this video, because then Paul George trade's probably not made. But so I think that those 3 years for sure, that probably would have been how they would have went about things. 2020 probably doesn't happen with KD. You probably don't even get a Paul George trade, so you probably don't even get the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, anything like that. But just as a fantasy, just as a looking at it now in the present, the 2023-24 season, there's probably the perfect team for Kevin Durant to play on at this point in his career, barring him wanting to, just be a veteran, maybe try to win an NBA title, would probably be the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is kind of funny. But I mean, if he was playing with these guys now, and you were getting a locked in Kevin Durant, not the one that's kind of maybe showed his real colors. If you were getting the Oklahoma City Kevin Durant, which was just a great guy, and loved his teammates and loved everybody, and wasn't so bitter and surly, which you can argue maybe he was with the Thunder, and we just kind of he was so just a kid having fun that we just didn't realize it. But you could argue that, but either way, you look at it, he would be a great player for the Thunder right now. He might mess up some of the chemistry, but if you just look top 7, 8 guys, and then you add him as in that mix, I mean, they would be, with the Chet Holmgren, with the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Giddey, Jalen Williams, Lou Dort, those guys. You had Kevin Durant being a veteran, being a guy that knocks shots down, being a closer along with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like it would be great. That team would be. They're really good right now. They would be unbelievable. With him, of course, like I said, that's a long, because 2020 probably doesn't happen, and if it does, if they do go with the Chris Paul, they make the George trade, and they just kind of say, hey, we're going to start rebuilding on the fly here, and KD's like, yeah, let's do it, let's have young guys, whatever, which I don't think he would have, but if he would have, if that would have been his deal, basically, by now, where the fruits of those, the fruits have have ripened off of that tree or whatever, it would be unbelievable. So if you like, subscribe. Like I said, I know this is a little bit long, but just going over things. If you disagree, comment down below, and I hope to see you next time.